Lux Occult is a part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
Etienne passe a loca vestra, et paxit intermos, redaturia mecum, vulsad maminu, matris et madibus, Etienne passe a loca vestra, et paxit intermos, redaturia mecum, vulsad nomine matris et madibus, Etienne passe a loca vestra, et paxit intermos,
I missed them again this year. I was immersed elsewhere when the weather broke and enough rain came. In the tree shade, stealthily, they nosed up through the sandy loam and the damp leaf litter. A sliver of color, then another, bringing their cryptic news of what goes on down there. The slow dissolve of lingam, the filaments, the little nodes like fists, assembling their nets and mists. Some were bright red, some purple, some brown, some white, some lemon yellow. Through the night they nudged, unfurling like moist fans, living sponges like radar dishes, listening. What did they hear of our human world, of so-called light and air? What word did they send back down before they withered? Was it beware? Look, the remnants, a leathery globe of dusty spores, a nibbled, pebbly moon, a dried half sphere, a blackened ear. That is September Mushrooms by Margaret Atwood. Hello and welcome to Lux Occult. This is the podcast where we gleefully taunt the mundane, butcher the Latin and most other languages, and also discuss a variety of occult and esoteric topics, exploring the intersections of magic, art, science, philosophy, technology, and so much more. This is occultism for everyone. I'm your host, Lux Estrada, and if you're hearing the sound of my voice right now, that means that this show, and magic for that matter, are for you if you want them. There's a lot of different ways to be more free, and using magic or making space for a spiritual practice in your life can be one of them. As always, I don't speak for anybody but myself. Others can, will, and should disagree with me sometimes. How would we ever learn anything if we were all in agreement at all times after all? And like those who attempt to be reasonable should be willing to do, I am always open to revising my opinions based on new evidence. Alright, so this is episode 69. Nice. I couldn't have worked it out any better if I planned. Who knows, maybe I did. Very excited to be bringing you this very special spooky season edition of the Lux Occult podcast. Not only are we celebrating Halloween, Samhain, Dia de los Muertos, and other holidays adjacent, but we're also celebrating the 3rd anniversary of the Green Mushroom Project's founding. Stoked to be bringing a couple of great conversations to you today, both of them with folks who are participants in the Mushroom Project, which is really rad. So I spoke with Laurel about her Catholic saints practice and how she works with the saints in a personal devotional manner outside of the purview of the church. She comments about why or why not working with the saints might be considered necromantic, and how the way that one chooses to look at things could influence the relationship that you build with a given saint. She also shares a lot of really interesting perspectives about how important cultural context can be to the way that the saint appears in the world. And we get into some pretty cool philosophical stuff about power dynamics in the Catholic Church, and how Laurel contextualizes her saint's work within her chaos magic practice. To lead us into that conversation, we're going to be hearing a track off of the upcoming Green Mushroom Project and We the Hollow digital mixtape. Fuck around and find out part 2. That's going to be released on the 31st, which is also, as I said, the 3rd anniversary of the Mushroom Project's founding. And peak haunting season. Big shout out to everybody over at We the Hollowed. Haunt on. You can find them at wethehollowed.org and learn more about the Green Mushroom Project at greenmushroomproject.com, and there will be links to those in the show notes. For the episode within the episode today, I talked with AR Salsman about his new book, Infinite Emptiness. It is not a coloring book, but is full of mindfulness and creative practices, so we're going to get into some of what that looks like as well. What are some ways that things like mindfulness and meditation can help you get your creative juices flowing or get you jump-started on a project you might be feeling stuck on? Aaron and I will talk about it. Before we get any further into the fun, I'd like to say thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate you taking the time to hang out with me and my very awesome guests here on the show. As I'm fond of saying, time is of course one of the few zero-sum games we play, so I really do appreciate you spending some of yours with us. I'm quite introverted, as folks who know me are aware, and I usually do have a high volume of work. This is a very busy time of year, so I'm not on social media all that much, but that doesn't mean that I don't want to hear from you all, and I'm definitely super, super grateful to have such amazing listeners, collaborators, co-hosts, co-conspirators, etc. Cat's pajamas are you all, as I have said before. And as always, I welcome people's thoughts, questions, comments, suggestions, or arcane revelations. You can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com or find me on Instagram at luxoccultpod. And we're going to hear from some of you in the listener mail segment later on. Alright, if you like the show and the other work that I've been getting into, you can support it on Patreon. If you do so, you can take a bibliomancy break with me, and there are no tiers or levels or whatever, so give as you will. Buy me a coffee is also an option for people who want to support the show with money, but do not want to do the Patreon thing. I really, really appreciate everybody who is doing that. Definitely a lot of time and energy, and now money, that things are getting more and more expensive as time goes on, it seems, and podcasting becomes more and more of a industry proper, I suppose. But yes, a lot of things that used to be free are no longer free. So thank you so much to everybody who's been supporting the show and spreading the word about it as well. I really do love making this thing, so thank you for making it possible. As I said a few minutes ago, we're going to be hearing from Laurel about her work with the Catholic saints, which she does in a non-dogmatic chaos magic context. I want to apologize in advance for the quality of my audio during this recording. It kind of sounds like I'm speaking from like an old car phone standing in a windy tunnel. It's very like old AM radio. It's very fucking terrible. I'm so sorry. I'm tempted to just throw away the headset I was using that day due to some technical issues. Luckily, Laurel does most of the talking during the interview, which is as it should be, in my opinion, and has some really cool and interesting stuff to say. She shares about first connecting with her patron saint and what that experience was like, and how, being an independent thinker who's into chaos magic and stuff, her saint's practice might look a little different than other people's. There's a lot of fun and interesting stuff in there, and if you're curious about doing some saints work yourself, Laurel has some great advice about how to approach that. We'll hear about how St. Barbara has zero chill and how St. Jude is practically a member of her family, and how you don't need to work with Big G God in order to work with the saints. And there's a lot more too. I will be back later to talk about the pirate or nautical themed ceremony that ended up emerging from the collaborative session that we ran to plan the ceremony we'll be doing to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the Green Mushroom Project's founding. And I'll also be back to introduce the episode within the episode featuring AR Salsman. We'll hear the grand prize winners of the tentacle-powered poetry contest and tracks from Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2, the Green Mushroom Project and We the Hollowed digital mixtape. Speaking of which, this is a spoken word track written and read by Amy Jo Tier Walker. This is Elo Campaign. Cheers.
Elo Campaign, Annula Helenium, by Amy Jo Trier Walker, read by Amy Jo Trier Walker. Elo Campaign is pure magic for the digestive, immune, and respiratory systems. The root contains so much inulin, the prebiotic fiber that feeds happy and healthy gut bacteria, that its name is derived from that fiber. It is a strong bitter, and so it stimulates digestion throughout the digestive tract, making it much less likely that indigestion will occur, and making it much more likely that more nutrients will be absorbed from the food. Elecampane is also one of the strongest antimicrobial plants, and it has biofilm busting action, so it can break apart microbes that glom together to hide from our immune systems. It is able to work much more deeply than other herbs in the lungs, and it can kill common tough infections like bronchitis, pneumonia, and MRSA. When taken on a regular basis, elecampane helps to prevent respiratory infections from taking hold in the first place, and it strengthens the immune system through strengthening the gut, where most of our immune system resides. It is the first herb I ever dreamed of needing, desperately reaching for it beside my stove, 3 days before the last time I got a respiratory illness, and it quickly took care of it. But, as one of my teachers says, it tastes like peppery mud, and honey will not sweeten it. I absolutely love the taste, because my body needs it so much. Dirt goddess, peppery mud goddess, come in and break me up. Rip apart every last bit of globbing clay, that I might flow freely, that I might reach down and grow my roots round and brown and rich, that I might reach around me, my leaves full and broad and so fuzzy, you'd think I'm mullein and want to kiss me. But I have work to do. I must reach up and out to rise with the sunflowers, the open palms of the sun. So yellow you think I'd run shallow, but I do not. I run deep, in all 6 directions. I reach in and clear all the crud out. I am hefty. I am strong. I am the dredge, the free flow of all your breath.
All right, well, my guest today is Laurel. Laurel, how's it going?
Hey, Luxa. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm really stoked to talk with you.
Me too. I'm excited to be here.
Oh, yeah. As I like to start interviews, could you please provide some context for the listeners by letting us know what you're up to, what you're into, and all of that good stuff?
Absolutely. I think I identify as a witch adjacent, witchy person. I have had a very magical life. My entire life I like to say that I walk with one foot the other side, pretty much. I'm always inside my own head. And since I was a child, I have always been very drawn to the magical practices. And it's just been a big part of my life, either consciously or not consciously. And these days, I have been exploring a lot of chaos magic, which is the branch that mostly fits my idea of the world. And I have also started a journey as a candidate with the AODA, the Ancient Order of Druids in America. And I'm also working on my candidate studies for that. I am not on track to graduate within a year, but that is what it is. I'm just working at my own pace. I do have a full-time job that is very emotionally demanding sometimes. So I just try to spend my time between reading, my dogs, and my magical practice.
Fuck yeah, dude. So we're going to be getting into your work with the Catholic saints today. So I figured that for folks who are kind of completely unfamiliar with what a practice involving the saints entail, can you give us a sort of very general look about what that might be before we get into the more specific things about how you work with them?
Yeah, absolutely. So when we're talking about saints, we're generally talking about canonized and non-canonized figures that are recognized by the church or recognized by the populace. And these, to me, are basically just the embodiment of thought forms. And oftentimes you'll see that from region to region, each saint will have their own characteristics that are attributed to them, or the same saint may have different faces. This is very common with the Virgin Mary. She is represented very differently among different cultures and even different towns. As a bare bones idea, this is a practice that happens within the Catholic Church, but a lot of times we don't want to think about it as being something that is exclusively to Catholics. I'm not trying to say that it is a closed practice by any means. I think that personally there's a lot of power control dynamics that have happened within the church, and that has resulted in us having to look at these saints in a very boxed way. But in reality, they're not like that. Many people will work with these saints and not necessarily have them attached to a church or God or things like that. They may just work with them as entities themselves. As a bare bones idea, though, it is part of the Catholic practice. And I myself was baptized as a Catholic when I was a child. I did not go through communion or confirmation or anything like that. My grandma took me to church a few times when I was young. And after a few times, I think after like we did an Ash Wednesday at some point, I was just like, yeah, this is not really for me. I don't enjoy the structure. I don't enjoy being told what to do. I have always been more of a free spirit in that regard.
Mhm.
So, did I answer your question though?
Yeah, absolutely. So like that, and that makes a lot of sense, like why you would be attracted to something like chaos magic if even as a kid you're like, I kind of feel like I want to do this my own way or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, within chaos magic, I work mostly within the spirit and energy models, a bit of the meta model as well. I just have this outlook in life where everything is energy, and the face that we put on it is just what is most appropriate to us based on our upbringing and the things that we consider appropriate for us, I guess. And in that way, I think that saints are that higher power for me. I don't consider myself Catholic these days. I don't think I've ever have, truly. I personally don't work with God. I don't It's not that I don't believe that he exists. It's more like I don't have faith in him, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah.
He's like I think that there could be some sort of architect out there, the architect of the universe, like the Masons like to call it, but I don't necessarily think that he is involved in the day-to-day or people's lives for that matter. But that's where the saints come in. The saints are, in a way, they were human at some point, before they became thought forms egregores or canonized, and they in a way know what it is like to be human, and they're more close to the way that we think. And if people have ever worked with like angels and stuff, you'll know like angels are like super militant. It's a whole different vibe, right?
Hmm.
But working with saints, I just think that there's like this human aspect to it where you can be a little bit more free spirited with them, and they will still catch you regardless of the wording that you may use. And of course, this is nuanced because there are certain saints that are not like that, are very much demanding or jealous, or they will be kind of more hot headed. But I mean, it's kind of like pick your poison too. Like there are so many saints out there that you can literally pick who you want to work with and what umbrella you want to work under, basically.
Fuck yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And if we're kind of thinking about the saints as being something that's much more human than some of these other thought forms or whatever we want to call them, that makes a lot of sense that there would be less translation necessary to kind of like make an understanding possible.
Exactly.
So let's talk about some ways that your practice with the saints might look a little bit different from the kind of like general stuff that one might see out there.
So let's just start like by talking about my two closest relationships with saints. I have my patron, which is Saint Barbara, and I remember the day where I kind of discovered her, and the day that it was like meeting her, and I just knew. I was a child, mind you. I was probably like, I don't know, 10. And I just knew. Like I was like, this is my saint. Like I have this connection with the saint, and I have always felt very close to her, so I have always prayed to her in moments of need and moments of wavering. I would pray to her in the way that I think most people would pray to God, almost just as that force. But at the same time, she is this spirit who's very fiery, very strong. So I'm basically praying to somebody who is just no nonsense, get your shit together and power through. The other saint that I work a lot with is Saint Jude Thaddeus. People may know him from the Saint Jude's Children's Hospital. He is the figure behind that. He's known as the patron of impossible, lost, or hopeless causes. And in my country, he is a very prominent saint, mainly because it's a hopeless cause. So a lot of people just turn to him as a way of salvation, and he is one of the main saints of my family pantheon, I would say. My mom has like a 3 feet statue of this saint in her living room. Like, I'm not even joking.
Oh, okay. So she's very into it. Okay.
Yeah, she's like, he has, and then she has like candles like in every room, and like he has like little offerings all over the place. It's like hilarious. He's like another member of the family in her house.
I love it. Okay.
And I adopted him kind of as a nod to my own family, even though he's not my patron, but because it is so he has such a close relationship with my family, I adopted him into my own personal practice as a way of honoring all the things that I know for a fact that he has achieved for us in the years that we've been working with him. So in the way that I work with my saints, I like to call them the big guns. I will only bring them out when I am completely at a loss. I think that's partly because, as I was saying, Saint Barbara is a very hot saint. She's very much like, she's not the type of saint that you will pray for at a minor disagreement at work, because she's explosive. The solutions are not going to be subtle. They're going to be explosive. So you don't really want that, right? Like, sometimes you just want a little bit more calming and nuanced.
She's
And
got zero chill. I get it. Okay.
zero, none whatsoever. It's hilarious. I'm like, no. We don't bring her out for nothing. We bring her out when we're actually desperate. And St. Jude, he's kind of like the opposite. It's not in the explosiveness, but also like in the sense of being desperate. Like, I don't like to bother him unless I'm desperate, basically. And for that reason, a lot of my practice focuses more on the magic by itself. And then I will bring them out if I'm really struggling. I will incorporate them in a working if this is just not the first line of defense, basically. If I've already done some steps and things are not working in the way that I want them, then I will involve them in that way. And this depends also, like, depends on the saints that people work with, because these are the two that I have mostly chosen for myself, or I have been chosen by them, I guess. It's most mutual kind of thing. But certain other saints are more for like the day-to-day kind of thing. And I could definitely see some other people being more reliant on their dailies with their saints, if that makes sense. Just because they're not this all or nothing type of power. So that is the way that I work with them. As a matter of devotionals, which is a big part of working with saints, I light candles. I will offer them prayers. It's not a thing of like sitting there with a rosary, which absolutely, I mean, you can absolutely do that. You can sit there with a rosary and chant however many times, whatever you want. But I treat them more like a personal connection rather than this scripted way of relating to them. I don't think that a day goes by without me devoting at least a thought. It may not necessarily, I may not make it to my altar. I may not light a candle. I may not put the offerings as often as I should. And that's just like part of my ADHD, I guess. Like, just sometimes I just forget, and I have to like set reminders to at least do it once every week. But in a way, I'm always like thinking about them, and it is also part of that relationship that you build, that you know that the day that you do need them, you can turn to them, because it's not something. And this might be just like a personal thing, but I've noticed it a lot with people who work with saints. It's not like you just like show yourself out of the blue and be like, I need this, to a random saint that you've never had a relationship with before. It is more about cultivating a relationship with that spirit, with that energy, and then they'll be also more receptive to your pleas, because they may not necessarily need you to ask something that is within their scope. They may be able to broaden their scopes just for you, because there's already like a personal connection with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. They'll do you maybe a little extra favor, or they just have more access to you because you've cultivated this relationship, so they're able to help you with things that might not be as easy for them to access. I could see it a lot of different ways. Yeah, very cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I love this. Okay, so when we first spoke about this on the Discord server and I learned that you had this very cool Saints practice, it was in the context of a conversation about necromancy. And I'm wondering, would you like to share some thoughts about whether or not working with the Saints might be considered maybe necromantic or a necromancy practice?
Yeah, that talk was so much fun, by the way. I was having a blast.
I loved it too. Thank you.
I think that the way that my brain works, I'm very much on the camp of nothing is real, everything is permitted, kind of. Within my own brain, I implement my own boundaries as well. Like, I give myself my own leashes, basically. But the basis of these saints being people who actually existed at a certain point. And then after they pass, they become sainted and they become canonized. And then they may lose that canon by the church. But their ideas and platforms just basically continue to live on in the people that worship them. And it continues to get molded and transformed from generation to generation, from town to town. I think that it is inherently a saint, like it's a necromantic practice in the way that working with anything that has been dead is necromantic in nature. And people will fight me about this, obviously. And I'm okay with that because it's just the way that I look at it, it is necromantic in the sense that they were once alive and now they're not. And you're working with the spirit of this person who is no longer in this realm, so to speak. But at the same time, the argument could also be made for it not being necromantic in the sense that they have transcended in a way by becoming part of the spiritual court of the Catholic Church or whatever it is, if that makes any sense.
It makes total sense. Yeah, absolutely.
So it depends on how you want to look at it, really. Some people will say yes, some people will say no. I think it could go either way. It just depends on how you personally want to look at it and how you want to see this figure. Do you want to see them mostly as a spirit that of a dead person, or do you want to see them as the embodiment of some ideal, a thought form, an egregore for some sort of energy? Do you want to see them as an extension of God himself? Do you want to see them, or herself, or they self, God, whatever it is? I don't think that God is a he or a she or anything for that matter. I think it's just a ball of energy. That's the way I see it anyways. And do you want to see it like that, or do you want to see it as them being their own sort of power independently from the context from which they were made popular?
Fuck yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Like, the way that you approach it will influence the experience that you get out of it. And yeah, that makes total sense. Fuck yeah. Well, Laurel, I'm so excited to hear more about the Saints, as well as about the Druid journal that you've created. But for now, how about we take a bibliomancy break?
Fuck yeah.
All right, fuck yeah.
Foxtrot 3, Romeo 2, 4, Yankee, Romeo 7, Bravo, Delta, Quebec.
Greetings, it's me, Luxa from the future. I hope you're enjoying the show so far. Thank you so much for listening. Lots more interesting stuff about the Saints to come as we get into that bibliomancy break and more. Laurel shares later about how to approach working with the Saints if you're curious about getting into that. And we also get into some philosophy and history about the Catholic Church. It's good stuff, so stay tuned. But now it's time for the episode within the episode, featuring AR Salsman. We're talking about the book which is not a coloring book, Infinite Emptiness, and the mindfulness and creative practices it offers. How do you get your creative or magical energies moving when they feel stagnant? Or how do you access creativity, mindfulness, or other types of practices when you're feeling shut off, blocked, or maybe just paralyzed by the fear of doing it wrong? Well, there's a lot to be said for simplicity, and having played around with some of the techniques like those in Infinite Emptiness and ones actually in it, I can vouch for their efficacy. So to lead us into our chat today, let's check out another track from Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2, the Green Mushroom Project and We the Hollow digital mixtape. Thanks so much to everybody who submitted audio for this project. We're actually going to hear a song by AR Salsman. This is the evocation of elder creation and destruction. Fuck yeah. All right, well, today my guest is AR Salsman. How's it going, dude?
It's going great. How are you, Luxa?
Going great. Thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with me today.
Yeah, thanks for taking the time to do this with me as well.
Fuck yeah. So we're going to be talking about your new book, Infinite Emptiness.
It's a book that I've been thinking about for a while and has come out of a meditative and artistic practice that I've been playing around with for a while.
Tell us a little bit about what type of book this is.
Right. So this is a book to help increase mindfulness and creativity through a instructional practice of just creativity. So whether you are struggling to be mindful or meditate or want to be more creative, it uses each one equally to help you get to that internal mind state to create or be more mindful.
Okay, hell yeah. I like mindfulness. I like creativity. Good shit. So how does this happen for us?
Yeah, so really I was struggling years ago, just trying to be creative and do art and draw very specific things. And there's always this part in my mind where what I put down on the page wasn't what I saw in my mind. And that was just super frustrating for me. I could not bridge that gap.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of artists or people who create things can definitely relate to this. I think there's honestly there's a lot here. I mean, I'm thinking even of the whole Pinterest fails phenomena. That's kind of like this expectation versus reality kind of thing. And the disparity there is fascinating.
Yeah, there's a lot of cognitive dissonance in between what you think you can do and what you actually do. And oops, I messed up on that one little line. And now this whole landscape or portrait is just totally ruined. So one day I got a new set of markers and I was just experimenting with them and drawing all these lines, wanted to see how they came together. And then I just had this little thought in my head about doing kind of a repetitive action with all these different, it was literally just shades of gray. So like the most simple scale that you could really deal with in art. And I just kept going with it and this really simple process. And I found that I just kind of lost track of time and got into this really deep flow state and wasn't focusing on the outcome. It was just playing with these little lines. And it felt really meditative and deep and mindful. And then when I looked at what I had created, I was like, holy shit, this is probably one of the best things I've ever made. And I didn't have any goal in mind when I'd started other than just seeing how these markers played with each other.
Yeah, I love that. And some of my favorite things that I've created have come through such a process as well, completely intuitive and not really knowing exactly where it's going, but just being along for the ride and enjoying that. And yeah, fuck yeah. So it sounds like you're kind of coming from more of like a fine arts background. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I majored in visual studies, been featured in a couple art gallery shows, and I've had a decades-long career in the creative arts industry, mostly in like a management capacity, but I've led a lot of creative teams to produce things. And one of the sticking points is really kind of generating that initial output and kind of removing that self-criticism and just letting things flow. Just ideas, whatever they are, has always been super important regardless of the medium that I've worked with. So this book has been an outcome of a lot of that. And I've also had close to 25 years now of meditation experience on a regular basis. So that's been a huge part of my life. So I really wanted to bridge those two gaps because I find a lot of people want to be more creative and do more art or have more mindfulness or have a meditation practice. And there's a lot of kind of self-judgment that gets in the way of doing that. So this system and this book is really a good way for you to kind of get out of your own head and just either be more mindful and or be more creative, which whatever you're looking for, and just put it down on paper.
Okay, absolutely. I love that. So this is a sort of vehicle whereby mindfulness and creativity can kind of support each other in making each one of them more accessible to the reader potentially here.
Yes. Because a lot of people, when they like sit down to meditate, they're like, oh, I just need to empty my mind and be super zen. It's like, no, you can be like observationally mindful, like be present. Like there's walking meditation. There's all these things. So like
a lot of ways to meditate. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I actually, this is very common. I hear a lot of people, and meditation, the practice is, kind of inherently frustrating sometimes. And for me, I think it's sort of supposed to be like, fighting against that frustration is what helps to build the discipline, which is one of the things that's so useful about it. But I think a lot of people feel frustration in addition to it just being frustrating because of the self-criticism that they're kind of involving in that. And I think that maybe, doing something like this might be able to help people like move away from that a little bit. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah.
I think that for myself, like I contextualize it in this way. Like there's a part of my mind, which is the writer, the creative thing that generates the stuff. And then there's the part of it that's the editor that wants to optimize and criticize and observe and change. And, and both of these things are useful, but they can't really operate very well at the same time. So in order to, to create, to generate the things, I need to be able to send the editor out of the room and just let the writer write.
Yeah, exactly. Some of the things I've pulled on like are from Japanese culture. One is wabi-sabi, which like to probably bastardize this term is the embrace of mistakes and nature and like the flaws in things.
Yeah, I love that. Okay.
Yeah, just kind of making it and just by hand. And there's this other meditative practice in Japanese Zen traditions, which is called the onsu, which is you make just with a brush, a circle with one breath, and it's supposed to represent your moment in time after doing a deep meditation and kind of analyzing and appreciating the uniqueness of that one expression. So in one motion and in one breath, try to draw as perfect of a circle as you can, while knowing that drawing a perfect circle is impossible. and appreciating the uniqueness of every single one you do is a part of the inspiration for this practice as well. So,
all right, fuck yeah. So walk us through this book a little bit. Like, what will we find if we pick up a copy of this thing?
yeah. So another part of the inspiration was like I saw the popularity of coloring books a while ago, and those are pretty fun, but they give you a fixed amount of pages and you got to color within the lines. So you can only use it once and then you kind of got to throw it away. So this is not a coloring book, but it is a book you color within. I mean, you don't have to use colors. You can use black and white if you want. That's fine. Everything's up to you. But in this book, there's a short introduction, mostly summarizing what we've talked about here today. And then in the contents of the book, there's a really simple, just instructional page. So, for example, that might be grab a ruler and a medium of your choice. That could be like a pen, a pencil, a paintbrush, and then just draw dash marks vertically across the page and then move the ruler over a fixed amount and then keep making those lines or those little dashes and keep repeating until you are satisfied with what you have worked on. So that kind of very instructional, repetitive process I've found has helped, like I said before, get myself away from the self-criticism and into a more mindful state and just looking at what I'm doing at each step. So focusing on each little dash that I'm making along the way has been super helpful for me. And this is very accessible to anyone of any skill level, creativity. So I don't know, if you're 5 or 50, you should be able to pick up this book and follow the instructions and make something beautiful. And part of the reason why I call it like infinite emptiness is like I provide you with blank pages for you to fill out, but it is also infinite as you can repeat this process on your own outside of the book with whatever pages you have lying around. So it's a coloring book you can use infinitely.
Okay, so each one of these things that's in here, you could take and make into like a sort of daily meditative practice if you wanted to.
Correct.
Cool. All right.
And there's like little aphorisms kind of sprinkled in there too, to help you get back into that mental state.
All right. Hell yeah.
Yeah. Luxa, I believe you've done a couple of these. What was your thoughts on this practice?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, you were nice enough to present some of these ideas to us on the Green Machine server. You did like a little talk for us and introduced us to, I think it was 1 or 2 of the exercises in the book. And yeah, I found it to be very chill. It reminded me of some of the exercises that can be found in Jan Friese's excellent Visual Magic, a great book for, doing types of like magic visually. And I think that there's a lot of intersection with some of those like meditative practices, which I really enjoyed. So yeah, I enjoyed making the circles. I used different coins for that. And I chose coins that I was using at the time, which had some like divinatory significance. So when I was conducting this exercise, I had a little bit of extra meaning that I was putting into it because of that. But yeah, I found it to be very enjoyable.
Very cool. I loved doing that for the Green Machine. Done this with a couple other groups, and it's just endlessly interesting and fascinating to see like just these very simple instructions, 3 to 5 lines, and how different and how creative everyone's interpretation is of something so simple.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one thing that we can come back to again is this kind of idea of self-criticism or wondering if one is doing it right. I think that that's one of the questions that we hear so often from people who are like new to the practice or who are approaching a new type of practice, perhaps like, am I doing this right? Am I doing this right? And sometimes, yeah, there are specific practices that there are specific ways to do them, correctly, if that's what you're trying to do, is that practice. But there's a lot in a more general sense, like something like this, like, the idea of doing it right or doing it properly, I think is kind of a barrier to a lot of people. A lot of folks, even in terms of like, journaling, I don't want to write in this book because I'm going to mess this book up with my journaling in it. And it's like, well, that's what it's fucking for, So I think kind of like getting away from that fear and that, just that kind of like shame, I think that's also a part of it, like the shame of like, it being exposed perhaps as incompetent or whatever it is that creates that fear. It can be a really freeing and liberating thing. So it's very cool.
Yeah. And also just part of that is giving yourself the permission and space to like mess up. And like they're just simple instructions. You can do it again. Grab another piece of paper. Do it again. Like there's no failure. Like if you didn't like that one, you took 5 minutes for it and not cool, like start over.
And again, it might not even be about what you're making. It might be about enjoying the process of making it. You might just throw it away when you're done because the point of it was to just do it, you know?
Right. Or that you could get some specific meaning. Like that one, I messed up because, or I think I messed up because I was in this specific mind state. Or maybe you didn't actually mess up and it was an expression of that specific mind state that you were in. So like, can also use these as a psychological or even divinatory kind of reflection of your current mental state. So I wouldn't say just throw them away, but like look at them afterwards. What'd you do well? What like would you improve on? Like, is there lessons you could learn and take forward into your life or the next time you do this? So
sure.
In making the book, I provided some examples and I threw away a lot. And the ones I have in there aren't necessarily the ones I'm the most proud of. I think there's ones that could be improved on. And I kind of wanted to show that to other people as well. So.
Okay. Yeah, that makes total sense.
No one's perfect and just kind of, it's really about the process. And like the thing we see, especially like online and social media nowadays, and even with like athletes and artists and musicians, is we don't see all like the hard work that goes in, all the tons of scrap paper and sketches artists throw away, all the hours that athletes spend shooting free throws and all the free throws they missed, or all the hours that they spent practicing piano or singing. Like,
yeah, we just see the cool Instagram shots or whatever of the results. Yeah.
So that's a part of this as well. So giving yourself that space to make mistakes and just keep at it is super important, and something that I'm really trying to give people the space to, you know, not color in this not coloring book.
All right. Well, fuck yeah. I love that.
Thank you.
So AR, is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you would like to mention, or do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
I think I asked my questions. I guess I do have one more. From your experience, what do you think other people could get out of this the most?
I think that maybe touching back on what I said earlier about it being a useful tool for people to, you know, as you said, just kind of get that ball rolling, get into a space where it's okay to make mistakes. Maybe that's the fucking point, right? Maybe that's part of the process, is to make mistakes. They say you can't succeed until you fail, right? But just kind of getting into that mindset and giving yourself that space and that permission, I think that that's probably potentially going to be something that's very useful for folks for this. So yeah, very cool.
Yeah. Kind of like fuck around and fuck up.
Fuck around, fuck up, and find out.
Yeah.
I love it. All right, AR, well, thank you so much for taking the time to hang out with me today. Where can listeners find Infinite Emptiness?
So you can go to notacoloringbook.com to pre-order the book. It'll be spiral bound with thick archival level pages that you can draw in. There'll be options for some art supplies if you don't have them lying around. So that would be the best place to go to find the book.
Okay, hell yeah. And there will be links to that in the show notes. And depending on when this episode comes out, the book might be available for more than just pre-order by then too. So go ahead and check it out.
That's entirely possible, yes.
All right, well, fuck yeah, dude. I appreciate you taking the time, and I'm super stoked for Infinite Emptiness.
Me too. Thanks for having me on the show, Luxa.
Hey, what's up? I'm Luxa.
And I'm Josh. Are you looking for a chill place to hang out online and chat about chaos magic, occultism, witchcraft, and more? Are you hoping to learn and share your knowledge and experience in a place that is welcoming to folks of all different backgrounds and identities?
If so, check out the Green Machine Discord server, home of the Green Mushroom Project and Administrism. Our growing community of chaotes, occultists, sorcerers, witches, and weirdos has all kinds of fun and interesting things going on. From chats and rituals to workshops, clubs, and more. There's a lot of cool opportunities to get involved.
Sounds great, Luxa. How can folks find us?
Well, for now, we're keeping things pretty small as we grow, so we're not advertising on any of the Discord services that do that. But folks can hit me up and I will send them a link. you can reach me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com, or you can find me on Instagram at luxoccultpod.
Fuck yeah!
Fuck yeah. Alright, fuck yeah, indeed. Thanks so much to AR for joining me. You can find a link to Infinite Emptiness in the show notes. I think there's a lot to be said for this type of work, stuff that allows you to get to a place of creative flow. With artistic mindfulness practices like the one in Infinite Emptiness, not only are you somatically engaged, you're physically moving your hands or arms, depending on what scale you're working, but there's a lot of cognitive stuff going on as well in terms of forming new neural pathways that will, in the future, make it even easier to get back to that juicy flow state. At least as far as I understand it. That's why this stuff is, they're practices, things that you can only get the thing out of by doing them and not just thinking about it. And it can help with dissolving other types of barriers as well, I think. Few or no magical approaches in the world will be successful when taken on with an attitude of predetermined failure. Unfortunately, changing one's attitude can be a lot more difficult than changing one's approach. This is why ego or identity or magic that works on the self is so powerful. Acting to work on where everything in your life touches, you, has the effect of working on everything else too, in that way. This has been where the vast majority of energy has gone in my private magical practice, trying to incrementally unfuck myself, and this is very, very common. As somebody who has had some, chaotic stuff go down along the way, my thoughts reflected reality very poorly, and I'm still working on this, as most people sort of have to throughout their lives. It's understood pretty well that brains are just kind of straight up liars sometimes. Anyway, my opinion about the self, which I've come to through much experimentation in the matter, is that it's not in any way a fixed quantity. We can tell ourselves stories about who we are, and many of these stories come from others who have told us who we should be or what we should be or whatever. And when it comes down to it, this is all an illusion. We do have the ability to make changes to who we are inside and how we feel and think about things and how we show up in the world for ourselves. And I'm proof, right? It's hard work. It takes a lot of courage and some discipline to follow through with, but it's possible. So I suggest that we operate from this premise rather than accepting self-imposed victimhood or limitations. So it's interesting. Most of the questions I've gotten about magic and how to do magic and stuff like that can be categorized as those which are asked in order to try to clarify the steps of a protocol that, as far as I can tell from, playing around with this stuff for the vast majority of my life, doesn't really exist. People seem to have this impression that there's some golden standard to which we must compare ourselves, and any deviation from this imaginary standard causes some level of distress. I think that here, thinking about this stuff, we can start to get a sense of how the mechanisms of control in a society function. Why do we have this idea of a golden standard? Well, because we've been trained to for most of our lives. There's an idea of the sort of ideal person one is supposed to be. And here in the US, we can kind of break that down to the ultimate ideal as being a heterosexual, cisgendered man with light skin and a certain income. This is reflected very clearly when we look at who we choose to elect as our wonderful leaders. People who think that this is not still the case impress one with their capacity for self-delusion. Anyway, this type of thinking, trying to adhere to some golden standard, which for many is probably impossible to achieve. This poison of hierarchy, perhaps, filters into many areas of our life and it rears its ugly little head all the time in people's magical practices. It's an insidious thing that robs individuals of their sense of agency and causes people undue distress for the simple purposes of controlling them, when looked at in a very broad scale. So, question authority and its right to authority. Question so-called magical authorities and those who set themselves above you due to silly little social games they forgot that they were playing. And always stay curious. If you think you figured it all out, chances are you are fast on your way to becoming an emperor who wears no clothes. Well, it appears my little rant has come early in this episode. Cheers! We have a lot more ground to cover with Laurel and the Saints, as well as hearing about the druidry and seasonal journals Laurel has created. Her takes on a divinatory practice, co-commiserating about living in Florida, beginning a Saints practice, and much more. I'll be back after the interview to do listener mail and shoutouts, tentacle poetry, and to tell you about the ceremony we're planning to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the Green Mushroom Project's founding. The theme is pirates. Yeah, let's go with pirates. And you're invited. Costumes are encouraged. But first, leading us back to Laurel, let's hear another track from Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2. It's been so cool hearing all the different styles and experiments people have going on with their audio work, and it's been a huge inspiration to me. So thanks so much to everybody who contributed audio for the project. As we listen to this next track, I'm planning to do so with the intention of sending some magical assistance to its creator, the musical Teapot. As far as I can tell, Teapot is someone who spends a lot of her time and effort trying to improve things in the community in which Teapot is a part. And when someone like that falls on hard times, I find it especially easy to will that magical resources and whatever other types of assistance are needed be sent that person's way. And should you feel like doing likewise, I would encourage you to listen to this track with that intention in mind. And if you're listening right now, Teapot, much love and stay strong. This is Nematonia by Teapot.
Do you have a D4 and a D8?
I do not. I mean, I do. It's just not in this room with me.
That is okay. I've got some right here. Do you have a question for the Oracle, though? I don't have one of those spare.
I do have a question. So I have a few new coworkers that I am training at my job, and one of them is a very slow person in the sense that she does not have that spark to get on going, and sometimes the work demands you to get off your butt and get going a little faster than you're going. So I'm going to ask Eris if I should have Saint Barbara spark her up.
Oh no, okay. Is she gonna get the St. Barbara guns? Okay.
Is she gonna get the big gun?
Oh, Eris, is St. Barbara called for in this situation to help spark some fire into Laurel's coworker? Okay, so let's see. We're going to be looking at Lady Chatterley's Lover by D.H.
dear.
All right on. I will be right back. Love this one. All right, I have located this text. Oh, Eris, is St. Barbara called for in this situation? Please tell us. Ravished by dead words become obscene, and dead ideas become obsessions. All right, thank you, Eris.
I'm focusing on the ravished.
Yeah, ravished by dead words become obscene, and dead ideas become obsessions.
I actually think that Eris wants me to let her go. Because, yeah, I think maybe I just need to stop trying to make her be more like me and just let her do her own thing. I don't even know.
I mean,
Maybe.
yeah. Well, who knows? Sometimes with these kinds of things, it clicks into place all of a sudden too in the moment when you need the information as well, I've noticed. So,
that whole ravish thing just scared me. That first word, I was like, no, we don't want to ravish that poor lady. She's so nice.
I mean, yeah, you did say that Barbara has no chill, and yeah, I don't know. I obviously don't have enough context to opine on the correct course of action here. But I love it. Thank you, Eris.
Thank you, Eris.
So this is the point in the interviews where I'd like to ask folks if they would like to toss out any ideas or thoughts they have about divination or randomness or anything along those general lines.
I mostly use tarot as my divination method of choice. I also use a lot of like personal notices in the way that things just like come to me, this ideas or thoughts of what will come to happen or what the general energy or sense behind a situation is. Not that I'm like fully psychic or anything. Like I don't. There's a lot of baggage that goes along with that word alone.
I feel like if you can like trust yourself enough to be able to get to that point, it's super dope, right?
Yeah, the way I see divination is just as a way of accessing our higher self and accessing the information that we already know within ourselves and being able to fully grasp it in this plane. So we just know it, but we don't have put words to it. We haven't put words to it yet. So divination allows us to do that. There's also a case to be made for consulting specific spirits or having your oracle or divination method have its own spirit for that matter, which I also think is true. Like I have decks that are way more chill and then decks that have no chill, and
yes,
it depends on who you're talking to.
Yeah, dude. Yeah. I saw a meme like this and it was funny. It was like my oracle deck and it was like, oh, everything's chill. And then it was like my tarot deck, you're in trouble, girl. Like
yeah. I have this deck that every time I pull it, it's just like swords and swords and swords. I'm like, stop. I don't want.
Maybe it's just about you being super smart or something. I don't know.
No, it was not. It was like 10 of swords over and over. I was like, I don't want to touch this deck anymore. I'm afraid. Oh, God.
Non-stop ruin.
Yeah, non-stop ruin. I'm terrified of that deck.
All right, fuck yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So, as we kind of teased on the other side of the break, you've recently created and made available a journal for folks who are into druidry and other like adjacent things like that. Would you be down to tell me a little bit about that project?
Yeah, absolutely. I created this Druid journal based on my own candidate studies for the AODA. I basically just made it into the tool I wish I had when I started my journal, my journey as a candidate. And I have made it available. It's on Amazon. I tried to price it like as reasonably as I could. It has sections for the books that you have as your required reading for your candidacy, and it has space for reflections and other parts of the Druid candidacy journey. And while I was working on that one, I also had the idea of making a seasonal offshoot of that journal, which is not related to Druidry, but just more open to people who may just be in different paths. And I'm calling this one the seasonal series because I'm just creating one journal for every season. And the autumn season journal is already available. It has spaces for bioregional observations and explorations. It has daily pages where you can track your moods, track the moon phases, and just basically talk about the things that you have noticed or going on in your life. And it has a space that is dedicated for celebrations of the seasons and the autumnal equinox, a space for you to plant what you want to celebrate, and afterwards a space for reflection on how you want to or how that went overall. I am currently working on releasing the winter journal, which I already finished the cover art and everything, but I have to finish putting it together. The way that I design the journals is they're completely undated, so people can fill them within one season, or it can take you like 5 years to fill that journal. It doesn't matter. You can always come back and just keep adding as you go. In the way that I envision myself using it would be having all 4 books and then just going through the year, noticing things about the land and the climate and the animals and the plants that are around me, and then just jotting those things down in those journals as time goes and coming back to them year after year and just continue to fill them instead of just going through one journal through one season, which you could also do. I mean, if you have a lot of variety around you. I live in Florida, so it looks a lot the same all the time.
We do have sort of seasons, but yes, I
Yeah,
live there
I
too, so
mean,
yes.
there's mango season and there's like avocado season.
There's like
Okay.
dry, well, like there's like the dry season and the wet season, and
Yeah,
then
but that's it. Like,
there's like the 2 weeks where you like straight up can't go outside.
there's hurricane season. I don't think we don't have fall and spring. We have like hurricane.
Hurricane. Yeah, we have hurricane, too hot to go outside.
Yeah.
No,
Absolutely lovely when the winter time. Oh my God, this past
oh yeah,
winter was so nice. I was sitting in my back porch. Yeah.
don't tell anybody, but it's usually pretty fucking nice here.
Yeah,
So,
don't come to Florida, please. Just we have
actually, you
enough
know what?
people.
Come here if you want to help, like with all the crazy stuff and vote differently than people have. Yeah, you should come here. Actually, I take that back, please.
If you can survive the heat, come to Florida.
If you're strong enough, you'll do great.
Yeah.
So you were saying that you've done the illustrations for this journal yourself?
No. I'm actually using Canva. Like I'm going through my own artistic expression phase through my druidry, but I'm not near good enough. I am using Canva, and then I have the premium subscription, which allows me to use the art that other people have created and mesh it into what I want it to be.
Okay, but you're designing it yourself and
Right.
everything.
I'm
Okay.
using other people's illustrations to design what I want it to look like, basically. Yeah.
Okay, fuck yeah. Okay, so getting back to the Saints, if people wanted to begin working with them, how would you recommend starting that or learning more?
there's this very good resource out there that I'm sure people have mentioned over and over. It's a Encyclopedia of Mystic Saints and Sages by Judica Isles, and it basically has all of the possible, well, maybe not all, but a very good number of all the possible spirits out there that one could work with. I would recommend first one identifies the spirit that they want to work with, and then approach them from a place of humility and just start like one would start with a friend. You would start maybe by bringing them a coffee in the morning, right? And lighting a candle the next day and just sparing them a thought throughout your days. You don't have to necessarily do anything very involved, like any initiation or presentation ritual. I mean, you definitely can. It depends on the deity as well that you're working with. Some would demand a little bit more, but specifically talking from the context of Catholic saints and folk saints mostly, it's more of a organic relationship that one forms with them, and it ideally would be somebody who you're gonna start turning to in the face of trouble, and it is a give and take. It is not something that you just pray when it storms, right? You want to create that relationship and that base of that relationship so that when it does storm, you have somebody to turn to, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. It's like a friend, if they're there all the time, you have that relationship. But if somebody calls you up out of the blue, that's like, hey, can you help me move tomorrow? You're like, nah, bro, sorry.
Like, no, who are
you know?
you?
Yeah, it makes total
Yeah,
sense.
exactly. I was actually just thinking about this when you went to get the book for the bibliomancy break, but in the context of necromancy, there is this idea of relics within the church, and these are you have like certain degrees of relics. You have things that were part of the saint, things that the saint has touched, and things that have touched the things that the thing touched. And a lot of times, these first degree relics are bones and clothing and things that were very much part of this person, allegedly, at least. And I was actually thinking about how that is intrinsically necromantic in nature. It is said that these things have a lot of power, these items have a lot of power. And this power comes from having been in contact with this one person, right? So I was just thinking about that, how that would also be super necromantic in the way that we think about necromancy in general, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I would definitely agree with you about that assessment. I'm curious, and this is kind of a philosophical question, and I would also be curious if listeners have thoughts about this, but do you think that the people that became saints like wanted to become saints? Do you think that that's kind of like a goal that some of them might have had?
Um, I honestly don't know. I've never actually pondered this before, so let me take a stab at it. I think that a lot of these people were either very righteous people or very generous people or very lost people.
Hmm.
I don't think that within the context of their own lives, they might have considered themselves becoming canonized or non, or just becoming more than just a person in their own time. I think that is kind of like a snowball effect that happens with them where they live their life in a certain way and then it picks up steam generation after generation. And we see this today with like folk saints, and I think that one of my favorite folk saints is like Frida Kahlo. Like she's so prominent, and I think that maybe like 200, 300 years we'll look back and she'll be like fully part of some sort of pantheon.
Yeah, I love that.
Today we just look at her, okay, she was a woman that lived, whatever, and she has all of this already starting to catch steam and snowballing effect that's happening, but it's too early to tell for us what will become of it. I think we just have the hindsight is 2020 kind of effect that we can look back, and maybe there were more saints back in the day that we just don't hear about because they have been forgotten or fell out of use or just completely discontinued by generations before us.
Yeah, that's really cool. I've heard some people say that, and I think this might have been something that Dr. Diana Pashalka writes about in American Cosmic, but like this idea that saints were some of the people that got away with doing magic. Like they did it in a certain, like under the correct auspices, that it didn't sort of like threaten the structure of like the power structure. And so it was able to sort of like become rolled into it in a way that other magicians' works might not have been. And I thought that was kind of an interesting way of looking at it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, that saying that Catholics are the witchiest of all the Christians. I fully back that up. Like, truly, they're not ever going to call themselves witches or magical practitioners for that matter. But there are plenty of sanctioned magical practices within the church that take place. I mean, if becoming a priest is not a sanctioned magical practice, I don't know what is. Like, there's like a full on initiation that goes along with it. If you've ever participated in a baptism, it is an intrinsically magical like it's a ritual, a magical ritual. Like there's water, there's fire, there's chanting, there's like all kinds of ideas, and we could spend all day deconstructing on the fact that how problematic some of them are and the background that some of these practices came to be under. But it is inherently magical. We could look at them in the way that we look at many of the other rituals and make the connections of being like, yeah, this is actually not that different. And I noticed this when I have a goddaughter that I baptized along with my husband. He's the godfather and I'm the godmother for her. So when she was having her baptism, it was so intrinsically magical. There was like oil anointing and water and this and that and holding of candles and passing the light around. I was just like, oh my God, I had, like, as an adult, I had never participated in such a sanctioned magical ritual.
Mhm.
Aside from like my own practices, I was like blown away by the fact that it all felt so magical in itself. So yeah, definitely, a lot of these people had their own magical shit going on, and some of it was acceptable by the standards of the church, and those were the ones. And then also, I think there's something to be said for the fact of claiming those people's work by the church.
Mm.
In a way to make it okay that they did it. So say, for example, that you have this figure who worked miracles like Saint Lazarus, and by denouncing him, the church would come under heat from the populace who was so enthralled with this figure, right? But if they claimed it by saying, yeah, this is an act of God, the God who's working through this person, then it becomes allowed, right? It becomes okay.
Yeah, and also it doesn't threaten what's going on. It's like, yeah,
Exactly.
we want that to happen,
Exactly. Yes. That's the way I see that. Anyways, like,
Makes a lot of sense.
yeah. I have zero faith in the church myself. I don't have any love for organized anything, truly. But I do think that they have made some very smart moves in the sense of appropriating things that other people have already going on to make it work for their own benefit and their own agenda.
Oh yeah, totally. Actually, I kind of see that as being a sort of like extension of the church's roots in the Roman Empire, because this is something that Julius Caesar was like really, really good at doing, going around and being like, oh, hey, you all over there, like you guys have like your own thing going on and like that's cool and everything, but like you can like still do that kind of, but like you're also going to be Romans now. So like you're
Yeah.
just part of us and like just give us some taxes and you can like keep doing your thing, but you're also super Romans now. Okay, so welcome to the club or we'll kill you, like, one of the two. So,
Yeah.
and I think that was a very successful strategy for the empire. And I think that the church really, in a lot of ways, is just kind of a continuation of that entity in another form.
I mean, it's still called the Roman Catholic Church for a reason, right?
Sure. Yeah. So, and I think that, yeah, a lot of the kind of strategies like remained intact all throughout the eras because they were successful, whether or not we think they are like ethical or whatever, like they worked. So, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Definitely.
And it also makes sense that we would find all of this, like, rich magical tradition in Christianity. Like, if we consider that some of the earliest references to Jesus was as a magician, one of these kind of charismatic magicians that would wander around and do tricks and gather followers and stuff. And as far as I understand it, like, early Christianity was kind of considered this, like, weird death necromancy cult. Like, they were going around with, like, dead parts of bodies and, like, doing this, like, necromancy shit. And so
Yeah.
it makes
I
sense that
mean,
those traditions remain intact. And yeah, it's just so fascinating.
we could talk about drinking the blood of Christ, and if that's not necromantic, I don't know what is.
That's right. Yeah, we're drinking Jesus's blood, we're eating his body. Like, there's all kinds of, like,
Yeah.
vor going on.
Yeah, like, come on. Open your eyes, people.
So it's interesting too. I wonder, there's a lot of, like, discomfort with other types of magical practices that is also, like, inherent with this kind of, like, the structure. Like, we draw this circle and we say everything that's in here is, orthodoxy. This is what's acceptable, and everything outside of it is not. But in some places, there's this, one has to kind of at the back of their head realize that there's this, like, sort of arbitrary distinction being made. And I wonder at what point that causes a lot of, like, subconscious discomfort for people. I don't know.
Yeah. I think it's just about power, right? And the
Hmm.
power of othering people. And by drawing that line, you have the control of what is acceptable and not acceptable. And there's always going to be people who fall on the outliers and people who fall just on the line and people who are completely within and completely blind to everything else, right?
Hmm.
I think that in today's date, we would definitely do ourselves a disservice by being blind one way or another. I think that whether you're inside the line or outside the line, you really need to be able to recognize everything that is just outside of your own paradigm. And it doesn't make it any less valid. I think there's a lot of power in people who are like very evangelical or like people who are super Christian. I think there's a lot of power there. It's just not the paradigm that works for me. And as long as you don't come trying to like beat me over the head with a Bible, I'm cool, right? Like,
Hmm.
go believe whatever you want to believe, and I'm
Yeah,
happy for you. As long as you find that magic within your life, whatever you want to call it, it's up to you, basically.
that's good advice. Yeah, I totally agree, dude. So we've already talked about Saint Barbara. This next question, it was like, if you have a special saint and you want to talk about that, do you want to talk more about Saint Barbara, or should I go to the next question?
Yeah, I think I already pretty much talked about her. She is, again, like an extension of everything that I consider holy or powerful in my life. I'm eternally grateful to her. I have a level of faith in that saint that is just, it's faith. It's truly like, if I ever commend anything to her hands, I know that it's going to be okay, and I don't have to ever worry about it again because it is going to be taken care of. Perhaps not in the way that I would take care of it, but it'll be taken care of, and that's just me having to be careful on what I actually commend to her. As far as things that we haven't talked about, I was thinking that we should mention the Red Text podcast,
Yeah.
which is a very, very good podcast. If people are not familiar, the red text in the Bible are the words that were said by Jesus himself. And this podcast explores folk Catholicism outside of the confines of the church. I don't necessarily identify with a lot of the things that their paradigm works under. Like I said before, I don't fully accept God. It's not that I don't believe that the force exists. I just don't have faith in that force. And it is a part of folk Catholicism to have this level of belief in that one force. And I just don't have it, so I don't really consider myself a folk Catholic to begin with. And this may change. Like, I will totally probably change how I view myself in 1 year, 2 years, 10 years. But like at this point in my life, I just don't think that I'm there right now. But this is a really good podcast for understanding the practices, the history, the different ways that we can approach this faith that are not tied to the church. It is a very queer friendly podcast. It is very much other friendly. And it's also, the two hosts are, I believe one of them is Filipino American and the other one may be Mexican American. I forget exactly, but there's a lot to be said for blended Catholicism practices and syncretism that happened after the Spaniards started conquering other countries, because a lot of the times the mainstream Catholicism got blended into the already existing practices, like we were talking about, that happened with the Roman Empire. And that just gives you like a different flavor of the cultural practice. It gives you a whole different view on saints and a whole different view on these powers, and even different ways to relate to them or work with them, which are entirely foreign to me, for example, because of the culture that I grew up in has an entirely different way to relate to them from maybe let's say people from Mexico. They have their own folk saints and their own Catholic saints, or not their own Catholic saints, but like their own way of working with those saints. And there are saints that have faces that are specific for them that have a completely different face for me. So, for example, there is the Virgin Mary. Of course, she's probably like one of the most prominent out there. And in my country, she has the face of the Virgin of Charity of the Copper, which is La Virgen de la Caridad del Cobre. And she is our face of the Virgin Mary. In Mexico, for example, you would see her as Mary, but you could also see her as Guadalupe. You could see her as many other things, or many other faces that may show up for them specifically, which I'm not an authority to talk about, so I can't really go off entirely on the history of how different cultures see this one virgin. But I do have the faces that are unique to me that I know other people don't have.
That makes a lot of sense, that these different like concepts or ideas or people, however we want to look at it, would, show up in different ways for different cultures.
And then also you have to like think about what culture was underlying there and how this original figure that came from the Catholic Church best fitted into their own paradigms. And that's how the blending started and how that eventually molded into the figures that we see today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think a touchstone here for me is Saint Brigid, who is also the goddess Brigid, as far as I understand it. There's probably all kinds of different syncretism that's happened there, but it's kind of an interesting look at how maybe more pagan things have been there's this kind of interesting feedback loop between like the pagan revival look at Brigid and Saint Brigid and all of these different, there's this interesting conversation happening there.
Yeah, for sure. And as we move into eras of more religious freedom, which I think, I mean, I live in the South, sometimes it's kind of iffy down here
I was just gonna say we hope. Yeah.
But I think that in a way we're moving in the right direction. Hopefully, we'll see. But as we progress in this path, we are going to have, like you said, these feedback loops where we will look at what was done 100 years ago, what was done under Christianity, what was done 20 years ago, and then start blending and creating our own practices off of that. I think that rejecting everything that is Christian in nature is a bit of just throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Mm-hmm. You can't just, and I understand that a lot of people, especially here in the States, have a lot of trauma from the church. I myself have like this insane rejection of everything dogmatic. I do not appreciate being told what to do, what to say, and even like in ritual, like I can't follow a script. My brain just doesn't do it. I'm incapable of following a script. My brain will start fizzling out and just like go in all different tangents, and everything is happening at the same time and backwards. So it's just weird. But there are a lot of these practices that were appropriated by the church or used by people who would identify as Christians, but not necessarily be harmful. They can be reconstructed or they can be extrapolated and they can be reused into our own practices, whether or not we identify as Christians or we believe in God.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And you know, there's a lot to get from there. I know people that use like the Bible as an oracle, where you can do
This
a
is
lot of things with it.
this is originally what bibliomancy is done with, is the Bible.
Oh yeah, the Bible.
So
Yeah, there you go.
this is very, very much a classic standard here for sure.
Exactly. So yeah, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. You can definitely work with these saints even if you don't consider yourself a Christian or if you reject the church. They can say that they own it, but they don't really, and it belongs to all of us. It has been a measure of power, place, and historical oppression from the church and the nations that have controlled religion over time. But ultimately, it began with the people, right? It didn't start with the rulers. It started with the people. So go ahead and take it back.
All right, fuck yeah. I'm so here for it. I think I'm just going to leave it there and not ask you too many more questions, but do you have any questions that you would like to ask me?
No, I don't think. Actually, I have a random question that you can cut off. What does it say? You know, when the theme music starts on the podcast, there's like a voice that starts saying something Yankee, something Yankee. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh, yes. So
what does it say? I don't know what it
it says a code in the NATO phonetic alphabet. So these, like, there's all kinds of like number stations out there that like there's all kinds of there's just a whole like slew of lore out there about like what these number stations are. Most people are under the impression that it has something to do with like intelligence community communications and stuff like that. But there are these stations where it's just people like reading these numbers or reading these codes in NATO phonetic alphabet. And so some of that in the beginning of the show is from number stations. Some of them are me reading like sigils and codes too. Like each like beginning of each Lux Occult episode begins with like a little piece of sound magic. And so that's what all that nonsense is in there.
Awesome. I love
information.
I didn't even think about it being like sigilized magic or anything. I was just like trying to figure out because it always like fades out and I'm like, oh my god, I missed it again. And I'm just listening to all the episodes, like I miss it every time.
Maybe what I should do is just play a little clip of is it the male voice that you're talking about?
No, the female voice.
Okay, it's a female voice.
Yeah, something something Yankee. I'm just like, oh my god, and I'll
play an isolation of it here for folks so that people can feel satisfied.
Awesome. So now people will know what I'm talking about.
Hell yeah.
Hell yeah.
That's a good question. Fuck yeah.
Yankee, Hotel, Foxtrot. Yankee, Hotel, Foxtrot. Yankee, Hotel, Foxtrot.
All right, so where can people find the journal?
Amazon. I can give you links so you can put them on the episode description.
Yeah, that would be awesome.
If that works, yeah.
Yeah. Well, Laurel, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for joining me and sharing your thoughts about your practice and about the church and so much else. This has been fantastic, and I'm looking forward to having more awesome conversations with you on the server and elsewhere.
Yeah, fuck yeah. Thank you for having me.
Eti in passe a loca vestra, del paxid intrumos, redaturia mecum, vulsada par, mamini, matris et manifox, Eti in passa loca vestra, paxid intrumos, redaturia mecum, vulsada par, nomine matris et manifox, Eti in passa loca vestra, paxid intrumos,
Fuck yeah, thanks so much to Laurel for joining me. It was super interesting to hear about how she and some of her family members too work with the saints. I'm not sure why, but I suppose I always assumed that you had to work with the big G idea of God to work with the Catholic saints. But when you think about the historical context of how some of them became saints in the first place, this assumption seems super flimsy and silly. It was really cool hearing Laurel break down her thinking about that, and about devotional practices in general. Laurel has also been a great contribution and participant of the Green Mushroom Project. Fuck yeah. There will be links in the show notes to the Druidry and seasonal journals that Laurel has created, as well as to Infinite Emptiness. Big thanks to AR Salsman for joining me to talk about mindfulness and creativity and all the rest. As the Yuletides begin to rise, supporting independent creators is a great way to find awesome and unique gift items. Another place to find awesome and unique podcast items is at the Green Mushroom Podcast Network. We've got Administrism, Grodgnostics, Primordia, Ad Hoc History, Smuts Up, Unearthing Paranormalcy, XV Planis, and now our newest edition, Camera Occulta. Hosted by Pythia, who you can also hear on Administrism, Camera Occulta focuses on the representation of occult practices in movies, mostly bad, but sometimes good. It's often quite interesting and enlightening to look at the conversation that takes place between how magic is portrayed in movies and how it is thought of by the broader population, as well as those who practice it. Pop culture magic is a huge thing, and I think people's conceptions about magic have always been influenced by the current myths of the time and place in which they live. The first episode is about Liam Cavan's film A Dark Song, and features a great conversation about the Abramelin adjacent working which is depicted therein. Check it out wherever pods are cast. I'm never far from my tinfoil hat, so put on yours and check out a special edition of Ad Hoc History. Asher, my brother, and my podcast brothers from other mothers, Dave from Unearthing Paranormalcy, and Flood from XV Planis, and I all sat down for a very fun discussion on the disclosure issue the other day. We go into some of the history of the topic of UFO sightings and experiences, discuss the recent Senate hearings about UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, and the possibility of non-human biologics. Then we get into some of the more spooky and esoteric territory. Flood being a paranormal investigator and Dave having done so much research into all things spooky were fantastic guests. It was a super fun time that we're hoping to repeat in the near future. That will be available soon on the Ad Hoc History RSS feed, where fine pods are cast. Ad Hoc History, it's not the history podcast you wanted. It's the history podcast you deserve. So check the show notes for links to all the fantastic Green Mushroom Podcast Network shows, as well as for a link to my new album of ritually produced oral erotica, Void Machine Adjustment. We'll hear the grand prize winners of the Tentacle-Powered Poetry Contest in just a moment here, as well as an update about the Green Mushroom Project as promised. But now, let's do listener mail and shoutouts. Shout out to Sister Bella on Instagram. I appreciate being included in the recent article you wrote for Days about chaos magic. There will be a link in the show notes in case anybody wants to check that out. Hello to Alexander on Instagram. Thank you so much for the kind words. I'm stoked to hear that the show's been useful to you, and I hope that the focus and momentum you're finding will carry you far in whatever direction you wish to travel. Greetings and salutations to Tarek Rising and Abracadabra. Very stoked for the release of the video for Call of Cthulhu, Fuck Around and Find Out mix, their rad contribution to the digital mixtape. I've seen this video and it's very fun. May powerful smiles abound. Shout out to Missy, stoked that you discovered the chaos magic context for some of what you had already been up to. I think that a lot of folks can relate. May the toolset and perspective serve you well. Shout out also to Zidum4 on Discord. Thanks so much for the kind words. Stoked that you're enjoying the meditation tracks. Fuck yeah. Shout out to Seed Person as well. Hope things are chill and awesome. Thanks so much to everybody who's been reaching out. You can find me at luxoccultpod@gmail.com or on Instagram at luxoccultpod. Do have a couple other Instagram accounts, but that is the one that is best to get to me on because that is the one that I actually check, so thank you. If you like the show and you're into what I'm doing over here, you can support it on Patreon. Making this thing is a pretty wild amount of work, especially for just one intrepid podcaster like myself, but it means a lot to me to be able to do it. Thank you so much to the people who are making that possible by giving on Patreon or Buy Me a Coffee, and to the people who are supporting the show by spreading the word and giving it reviews and stars and all that good stuff. So tell your hairdresser and podiatrist about the show. Tell people standing in line at the Halloween store and the denizens of the pumpkin patch. Tell your foes and your lovers, your frenemies and parasocial acquaintances, and the person who analyzes your stock portfolio. You can also post about it on social media or write a positive review. All of these things are super helpful, so thank you so much to those who are already doing so. And yes, don't forget to smash the fucking shit out of that follow button so you can get updates when new episodes come out. You can find Lux Occult, Hello Void, and other merchandise available at Illumin Industries, which is my Etsy store. Items will be printed on demand using the most eco-friendly options I could find and shipped directly to you at pretty close to cost. There's some pretty fun stuff in there. The grand prize winners of the Tentacle Power Poetry Contest will be getting something from there, and all of the winners will receive swag bags, which I am in the process of putting together. If you submitted work to the contest, please check your email. I'm still waiting for a few folks to get back to me about where I am to send their prizes. We'll be hearing the 2 grand prize winning poems in a moment here, but I did want to mention that the very dope Lux Occult Hello Void design was produced by Laughing Dog, aka T.A. Grady, who submitted this very fun short piece for Fuck Around and Find Out too. This is Grim Jest by T.A. Grady.
Shiver wing memoirs, rattling bones, blood on the waves, deafen the tones. Saccharine delights, whittled out joy, meat flesh fantasies, meat flesh toys. It echoes in the canyons, dream stuff of the head, playing dress up gods, and eating the dead.
Spooky, I love it. Fuck yeah, so let's get into some tentacle-powered poetry here. I've already read all of the fantastic contributions that I received for the cryptography and poetry contest that was going on earlier in the summer. Thank you so much to everybody who contributed. Alright, this first one is by Max. Who knows current better than those who dwell in it? Potential is innately evident to those who always have ink. Power is an eightfold consequence. Fuck yeah, I love it. Our next grand prize winner is this very fun limerick by 3 Weird Eyes. At the apex of Master Ohm's tower shone the secret of tentacle power. For occult currents flow from potentials, you know, an affront to which seeks to devour. Fuck yeah. Thank you so much, 3 Weird Eyes. I wasn't sure if anybody would be interested in solving strange cryptography puzzles and then writing poetry about the results, but I was very, very delighted when some people actually wanted to participate. So thank you so much for playing along with my very weird contest. As I mentioned earlier, to celebrate the 3rd anniversary of the Green Mushroom Project's founding, the mushroom's 3rd birthday, as it were, we're going to be conducting a special celebratory ceremony. We created this by first drawing 5 lines from the 23 bibliomancy scripture at random, using dice to decide which lines it would be. So what we got from that exercise is as follows. Investigational tool. As a common thread to a kind of unilateral, I alluded earlier to the problem of speed, but this is also a problem. Thinking never yields accurate descriptions of metabolic processes, but neither age nor blindness had dulled her wits. Captains would appreciate it. Otherwise, it would have been. So out of these lines, the party planning crew and I have come up with what we think is going to be a very fun and hopefully empowering ceremony. We're calling it Pirates Revel, Let Your Freak Flag Fly. That's going to be on Halloween at 8 p.m. Eastern on the Green Machine Discord server, the 31st of October, 2023. Grab a birthday candle, some offerings for the beloved dead and for the mushroom, some art supplies for making your sigilized flag, a candle with the green mushroom hypho sigil, and libations to enjoy as we prepare to boast and brag of our coming achievements. Costumes are encouraged if you're into it. Shane Mindbender is going to be running a special Fungal Friday chat the night this episode comes out about using the hero's journey as a la Joseph Campbell for personal development work. We've also been working on a new thing that's pretty much ready to roll out called Mycocultus. It's something that Dave Ardrey from Unearthing Paranormalcy put together for us with help from Shane and our crack team of beta readers. It's a reskin of some classic tech that you'd find were you to go down the whole Golden Dawn or adjacent type of road. We've taken out some of the gender stuff and replaced some things with more fungi-forward language that we think folks will find more accessible. There will be a special episode out soon in which Dave and I talk about Mycocultus. Laura is leading a 6 Ways by Aidan Wachter study group. Check out the meeting on Saturday, November 4th at 3 p.m. Eastern. And shout out to Aidan Wachter too if you're listening. Fuck yeah. These and many other events and activities are free and open to any who would like to attend. I mean, provided we haven't had to ban you from our server for causing trouble or whatever. That has happened a few times, but in general, it's super chill. So as I said, open to anyone chill who wants to come hang out and do a bit of online magic and hang with us. And that is, of course, free of charge. So lately, considering everything that's been going on with the project and all kinds of other things, I've been sort of feeling this overwhelming sense of gratitude. It sneaks up at me at times, like when I see people's work or read something that somebody has posted or written. It was a really dark time, October 2020, when me and others first began spreading the spores that would grow into the Hyphosigil network and current. I was confident that it would work. Like, on some level, magic is effective, but I could definitely not have anticipated how well things would go. I'm so excited to see how things will continue to grow and develop as we move forward. There have been some minor setbacks, and we've had to deal with a few unpleasantries, but overall, for an online thing in today's atmosphere and social climate, it's incredibly fucking chill. I just want to say how much I appreciate that, as well as all the time, thought, magical, and creative energy, and all of the rest of it that people have contributed towards building this thing together. It's an honor and a privilege to be working with all of you. Thank you. And to the egregore itself, the mushroom, thank you for teaching us, thank you for protecting us, and thank you for bringing us together. Gratitude. Remember to resist. Resist by maintaining sovereignty of the self. Resist by maintaining love of the self. Resist by maintaining fierce loyalty to love and pleasure. Resist with acts of radical kindness. Focus on the path to better times. Fuck yeah. Thank you so much to Laurel and AR for joining me today. Thanks to everybody who submitted work to Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2 in the Cryptography and Poetry contest. And most of all, thanks so much to you for listening. Much love. This is Lux Estrada, reminding you to stay strong and stay fucking curious. Let's go out with another track from Fuck Around and Find Out Part 2, The Green Mushroom Project and We the Hollow digital mixtape. This is Initiation by Nathan Dube.
Lux Occult is a part of the Green Mushroom Podcast Network.
Want to get an important message across but having trouble finding the right words? Wish your gift could express that special sentiment you feel for your partner, friend, coworker, family member, pet psychic, crossing guard, meth dealer, or boss? Now there's a way that your special message can go directly to your gift recipient without them even realizing it. Introducing Sublimitext, the gift card service that works on the subconscious level to let that special someone know exactly what they mean to you. For a flat fee of just $6.66, the Sublimitext service can be added to any Illumin Select gift order and delivered right to the recipient's door. Also available in audio form. Sublimitext is so seamlessly integrated into the consciousness of the recipient, I bet you didn't even realize that we put one right in this ad. P.S. The message is, I love you. And you'll love Sublimitext or your money back. See Illumin Industries cyber catalog for details.
So what's up? It's the sex-positive comedy show your parents forgot to warn you about.
I will be your delightful host, Deep Weird, and with me are my three very sexy friends.
I'm Captain Spanx, dropping anchor. It's a spanker.
Hi, I'm Ray Gunnigan, and I'm about to eat 16 feet of nerds, bro.
And I'm Luxa, and that is all you get to know about me. Join us for a ride full of twists and turns as we explore the rabbit hole that is human sexuality.
I, Smuts Up Crew, would like to propose
Oh my god, he's proposing.
a question.
Get down on your fucking knees. If you're curious about expanding your horizons or getting more comfortable in your own skin, then the Smuts Up podcast is for you. Or maybe you're just a horny nerd or a person who enjoys outdated references. The Smuts Up podcast is fun for the whole step family.
I'm gonna say the B word. Butthole sunning.
If you were to put a hot dog in it, is it a sandwich?
I don't know. Is a bread dildo with a hot dog inside it a sandwich? Write to us at smutsup69@gmail.com and let us know what you think about that. Available on your favorite podcast apps.
I put a D20 in my mouth.
Nailed it.